wish Pete Buttigieg well and respect his service, and I imagine he'll continue finding ways to serve.
And so you don't agree with the plotting for him dropping out?
I've said how I feel about this.
I'm just okay.
Congresswoman, how you doing today?
Great.
Thank you for the op-ed. No, come on. I'm not going to ask you if you're going to run third party either. Okay, I got you.
Okay, all right.
So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for the op-ed you wrote in the Hill the other day. It was really inspiring, and it kind of shed a lot of light on our foreign policy situation as pertaining to Russia. However, I want to touch on the election part of that, because you wrote the bill for the Securing Americans Election Integrity Act. It's the only bill that really addresses open and closed source within our elections, because our elections aren't even owned by the people, they're owned by corporations. Why do you think not only the mainstream media, the establishment, but the people, the voters, are so asleep when it comes to our elections?
I think there's a variety of reasons. People feel disheartened. They feel like that their voices and votes haven't counted for so long, and that the power of big money and big political and powerful interests in Washington have always ruled the day, unfortunately. But my message to voters here and across the country is that if this is concerning to you, then we must vote. We must make sure that our voices are heard, and we must continue to press leaders in Washington to pass my legislation, the Securing America's Elections Act, so that very simply there will be no shadow of a doubt that the votes that we cast cannot be manipulated without there being a paper trail, so that we can audit and make sure that those counts are accurate and that the leaders of our country are actually chosen by the people.
Thank you, Tulsi.
Thank you.
Hi, Tulsi. Aloha. Welcome back. I have a two-part question pertaining to DNC corruption. You sort of touched on this today in your speech when you talked about the fact that we're heading to a convention in which we've had over 90 superdelegates basically come out and publicly state that they're okay with thwarting the public will, and if Bernie Sanders goes into the convention as the highest votes, that they want to stop him. That's the first part. The second part, I'm pretty disgusted by the fact that they have continually left you off the debate stage. And yet, Michael Bloomberg, who has been able to come in, they changed the rules for him. They wouldn't do it for Cory Booker, they wouldn't do it for you, but they did it for him. So what are your feelings on both of those two things, and how are they related?
It points to both of these issues, really point to the powerful elite in Washington making decisions that best serve their interess rather than honoring and respecting the voices of the people of this country, whether they agree or disagree with what the outcome of the election is. I think that has a very troubling effect on our democracy and on whether or not people feel like they should even get up and be involved in this process in the first place. This is why it is so important for all of us to continue to raise our voices, both at the ballot box, online, going and talking to our own elected leaders about reminding them who they work for. As the Democratic nominee, these are some of the changes that I'll bring about. I'll get rid of superdelegates, work to make sure that we have open primaries so that every Democratic candidate running for president speaks to all Americans and offering their vision of how they will serve, and making sure that we make it as easy and as accessible as possible for people to exercise their right to vote.
All right, thank you. One follow-up thing? I know why I said one for each person. Right, okay. 2 questions. All right, you're next. You can come on in.
Alrighty. Great. So can I take two quick minutes?
Okay.
Awesome. So St. John here. I'm backstage with presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, and this is a super, super, super thrill for me.
Thank you. You have been covering our campaign and talking about the work and the message that we've been bringing to people across the country for a long time. I'm so happy to see you here today.
Well, it's exciting to be here, and it's always great seeing you. And for our audience, I do a Top 40 radio show. And there are a lot of people who, they go, oh, it's Tuesday is the day we're going to go vote. I think I've heard of that Biden guy. I'll vote for him. I wanted to give you a quick opportunity to explain to people why your campaign is so important and why they should vote for Tulsi Gabbard in this primary.
That now is the time for a new generation of leadership that brings a fresh approach to solving the problems that people all across this country are struggling with. And it's important to make sure that you have someone who has experience to turn that vision into reality. I bring experience in two very important ways, both through my nearly 17 years of service in the military, combined with my service in Congress now for almost 8 years, focused on national security and foreign policy. I am best prepared to walk in on day one to fulfill that role of Commander-in-Chief. And secondly, the experience that I have in working with Congress, regardless of which political party is in charge. For your listeners, they'll hear a lot from different candidates who are saying, I'm going to do this, this, and this. But unless you're able to work with Congress, whether it's controlled by Republicans or Democrats, you're not going to be able to get any of it done. And we'll continue to see the perpetuation of these problems that we've been struggling with for so long. My first 6 years in Congress as a Democrat were with the Republican majority in the House. And regardless of where we disagreed on a few or many issues, I found ways to work with my colleagues, putting country and the American people first to deliver results and pass legislation. It's those experiences that I'll bring to serve as president to make sure that our government is of, by, and for the people, breaking through the hyper-partisan gridlock and making sure always, every day, the interests of the American people come first.
Can I follow up with one quick thing?
Real quick.
I know that foreign policy, that's where I really, when you came to sort of in front of my face, I was like, oh my God, she's actually talking about the fact that if we don't spend trillions on regime change wars in the Middle East, we can bring that money right back here and spend it back here. And there are a lot of people who don't connect foreign policy and what happens back here at home.
This has been not only a central message of my campaign. I'm the only candidate that's raising these issues of the cost of war, but it's also one that's attracted the support from Americans from across party lines who may have strong disagreements on other policies, but recognize that this is central to every other issue that we face. That so long as we have leaders in Washington, a president and commander-in-chief who is willing to send trillions of our taxpayer dollars to go and wage wasteful wars that do not make us any safer, we will never have the resources that we need to serve the interests of the American people, to invest in things like education and healthcare, climate change, protection of our environment, infrastructure. There are so many pressing needs that we have here. This is why I'm running for president, to bring about this sea change in our foreign policy, exercise that leadership, and get our priorities straight.
Well, I can safely say you're a once-in-a-lifetime candidate, and I'm thrilled to have this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.